Far out in the Atlantic, where Europe begins to disappear behind the horizon, a wall of green rises almost straight from the ocean. Clouds snag on volcanic peaks, waterfalls spill from cliffs into empty air, roads curl across slopes that seem too steep for houses, while white villages cling to the mountainsides as if gravity has simply been negotiated away. Below them, the Atlantic keeps pounding black rock with a slow, endless thunder. From a distance, it looks effortless. A subtropical paradise of flowers, infinity pools, cruise ships, mountain trails, and balconies facing an ocean that seems to have no end. That is the Madeira most visitors come to see. But look closer. Behind the postcard is an island where almost nothing about ordinary life has ever been simple. There is precious little flat ground. Farms must hold themselves against steep slopes. Water may fall generously on one side of the mountains, while the fields that need it wait somewhere else. For generations, people carved narrow channels through forests and rock to make water travel where nature had not intended it to go. Even movement became a negotiation with the landscape. Roads climb, tunnels pierce mountains, fishermen push into deep Atlantic water before dawn. Families build homes where the land seems determined to slide toward the sea. And yet people stayed. They planted, they fished, they carried water. They connected villages. They transformed a volcanic obstacle into something far more intimate. A home. So the real question is not why this island is beautiful. It is how ordinary life became possible here at all. This is Madeira. Long before the first tour buses begin climbing the mountains, Madeira is already awake. At 5 in the morning, the island is mostly darkness. Only scattered windows glow along the slopes, small squares of yellow light suspended above the Atlantic. Far below, waves strike the black volcanic shore with a deep, patient rhythm. Then another sound enters, an engine. A delivery van crawls uphill through a narrow street, its tires humming against damp pavement. Somewhere behind a half-open bakery door, metal trays knock together. Warm bread begins to perfume the cool air, mixing with the sharper smell of coffee and the faint salt carried inland from the sea. A dog barks. Another answers from somewhere higher on the mountain. In a kitchen, a spoon taps against a cup. A radio murmurs quietly. A front door closes. Footsteps descend a stone stairway still wet with dew. Madeira does not wake all at once. It wakes in layers. Near the coast, fishermen prepare for the day while harbor lights tremble on dark water. In Funchal, workers begin moving downhill towards streets that will soon fill with buses, taxis, cafe tables, hotel staff, school children, and visitors. Higher above the city, the morning remains slower. Mist hangs between houses. Leaves shine with moisture. Small gardens sit silently behind walls. Someone waters plants before the sun grows stronger. A neighbor calls a greeting across the road. For a few minutes, there is a strange balance. The island is working, but it has not yet become noisy. You can hear birds before traffic overwhelms them. You can smell breakfast before exhaust settles into the streets. You can feel the cool mountain air before the Atlantic sun begins warming stone, roofs, and skin. Then the horizon changes. A pale line appears above the ocean. The mountains slowly emerge from blackness. And suddenly, the geography of Madeira becomes impossible to ignore. Every house seems to sit above another house. Every road appears to climb or descend. Every ordinary morning begins with a landscape that refuses to be ordinary. By 6 o'clock, Madeira is no longer sleeping. The island has begun another daily negotiation between mountain, ocean, and the people living between them. By mid-morning, Madeira has changed again. The quiet roads are brighter now. Laundry moves in the Atlantic breeze. Gates open. Voices travel between houses built so close to the slopes that one family's roof may sit almost level with another family's garden. And this is where the island begins to reveal something the landscape alone cannot explain. Because surviving here has never been only about roads, water, or stone. It has also been about people. In a small neighborhood above the coast, an older woman steps outside carrying a bag of vegetables. She does not make it far before someone calls her name. A short conversation begins. Then another neighbor appears. Nothing dramatic happens. No ceremony. No grand declaration of community. Just a few words exchanged across a wall. A question about someone's health. A comment about the weather. A reminder that a relative will be coming later. These interactions seem ordinary because they are ordinary. But ordinary things become important in places where geography can make independence difficult. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. A broken car means something different when your house sits high above town. A hospital appointment, a grocery run, a leaking roof, a heavy bag carried uphill. Small problems can become much larger when the mountain is involved. And so, another system exists here. You cannot see it on a map. There are no concrete channels carrying it across the island. But like the levadas that move water through the mountains, this system moves something equally necessary: help. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. It travels through families, through neighbors, through the person who notices that an elderly relative has not opened the shutters this morning, through someone who drives another person downhill because they are already going that way, through food prepared in one kitchen and quietly carried into another. Later in the day, that invisible network becomes easiest to see around a table. The room is not silent. Plates arrive from the kitchen. Chairs scrape against the floor. Someone speaks too loudly from one end of the table. Another voice interrupts. A child reaches for something before being told to wait. Coffee waits nearby. Bread is passed from hand to hand. Older relatives sit among younger ones, and conversation crosses generations as naturally as food crosses the table. This is not a performance of tradition for visitors. It is simply the architecture of belonging. For younger people, family can be a source of support, advice, expectation, and sometimes pressure. For older generations, it can be continuity. The island outside is changing rapidly. Tourism grows, jobs shift. New residents arrive. Young people look beyond the Atlantic toward opportunities elsewhere. But inside these rooms, the past and the future still meet over the same table. Grandparents remember a Madeira that moved more slowly. Parents belong to the generation that watched roads, tunnels, tourism, and mobility transform daily life. Their children grow up with an island connected to the world in ways earlier generations could barely have imagined. 3 different Madeiras. 1 meal. That does not mean family life here is perfect. Closeness can comfort, but it can also create obligation. Everyone knowing everyone can feel safe to one person and restrictive to another. Tradition can provide identity, while also asking younger generations to carry expectations they did not choose. Real community is rarely simple. It contains affection and disagreement, generosity and responsibility, freedom and duty. But when difficulty arrives, these relationships often become visible in their most practical form. Someone shows up. Someone brings food. Someone offers a ride. Someone knows whom to call. And perhaps that is one reason communities on islands can feel so different from the anonymity of larger cities. In a city, it is possible to disappear into a crowd. Here, on a mountainside facing an enormous ocean, disappearance is harder. Your absence can be noticed. Your struggle can become someone else's concern. And your life, whether you intend it or not, becomes connected to the lives around you. Madeira's mountains may separate one valley from another. But inside its homes, another force has spent generations pulling people together. Because on an island shaped by steep ground and deep water, sometimes the strongest infrastructure is not built from concrete at all. Sometimes it is the person who knocks on your door. By late afternoon, another smell begins to drift through Madeira. Smoke. Not the heavy smoke of industry, but the thin, fragrant ribbon of a fire being prepared somewhere behind a house, beside a roadside restaurant, or beneath a simple shelter in the mountains. Wood cracks. Metal strikes metal. Someone laughs above the hiss of meat touching heat. And suddenly, the island can be understood through something much smaller than a mountain. A skewer. Espetada is one of Madeira's most recognizable foods, but to describe it simply as grilled beef would miss almost everything that makes the experience matter. Because the story begins before anyone sits down. Large pieces of beef are prepared with little desire to disguise what they are. Garlic, salt, the perfume of bay leaf. Traditionally, the meat is threaded onto a long stick cut from bay laurel, then held over glowing heat until the outside begins to darken. Listen closely. Fat falls onto the coals. A sudden flame rises. There is a sharp hiss, then another. Smoke wraps around the meat and climbs into the cool mountain air. The person tending the fire steps back for a moment, face warmed by the flames, then leans forward again to turn the skewer. There is no hurry. That may be the first thing a visitor notices. The fire decides the rhythm. You can rush many things in modern life. Traffic, emails, flights, schedules. But meat suspended above glowing coals has its own clock. Around the grill, people begin to gather before the food is ready. That matters. Someone carries bread. Someone brings glasses. Someone has already begun telling a story that another person has heard many times before. Children move between adults. An older relative watches the fire with the quiet authority of someone who has seen this ritual repeated for decades. The meal begins long before the first bite. Then comes the bread. Bolo do caco arrives warm enough that butter begins to surrender almost immediately. Garlic and parsley spread across its surface. Tear it open, and steam escapes from the soft center, carrying the smell of warm dough into the smoke-filled air. Hands reach across the table. Pieces disappear. Another loaf arrives. Then, the espetada is brought forward. Sometimes the long skewer is suspended above the table, allowing the meat to hang within reach. The browned edges glisten. Juices collect briefly before falling away. The first bite is simple. Smoke, salt, garlic, beef, and something herbal lingering underneath. Nothing about it needs to be complicated. Perhaps that is exactly the point. Madeira's traditional food often feels connected to the logic of the island itself. Take what is available, understand it deeply, waste little, and allow simplicity to become character. But food here does more than satisfy hunger. It creates a reason to remain at the table. Espetada has long been associated with gatherings and celebrations, and today it remains food around which people come together. That changes the meaning of the fire. It is not only cooking meat, it is creating time. Time for a brother to argue with a sister. Time for grandparents to repeat an old memory. Time for friends who have been busy all week to finally sit in the same place. Time for someone who has moved away to return and discover that certain smells can collapse years into seconds. Food can do that. A mountain can tell you where a people live. A road can tell you how they move. But a familiar smell can tell you where they believe they belong. And Madeira has other flavors that carry the same intimacy. Along the coast, seafood arrives with the mineral smell of the Atlantic still clinging to it. Limpets can reach the table sizzling in the pan, their shells surrounded by butter and garlic. Bread is torn apart and pressed into the juices. Glasses knock softly against one another. Conversation continues. No one needs to explain that the ocean is present. You can taste it. Yet culture here is not frozen inside an old kitchen. Madeira is modern. Restaurants change. Young cooks reinterpret familiar flavors. Metal skewers can replace traditional wood. Families eat differently than their grandparents did. Visitors arrive with tastes from across the world. Tradition survives not because nothing changes, but because certain experiences remain recognizable even after the details around them evolve. Fire, bread, a crowded table, someone insisting that you eat a little more, someone else already cutting another piece. And beneath all of it, the quiet understanding that food is rarely only about food. Because every plate arriving at this table carries an invisible journey. Someone raised it. Someone grew it. Someone caught it. Someone transported it. Someone stood beside a hot grill while everyone else waited. And once we follow that journey backward, away from the warm table and into the streets, farms, harbors, kitchens, hotels, and markets of Madeira, another side of island life begins to appear. The side that must work every day to keep paradise running. By noon, the Madeira seen from a hotel balcony is fully alive. Cruise ships sit beyond the harbor. Rental cars climb toward viewpoints. Cafe terraces fill with voices in several languages. Suitcases roll across polished floors. Restaurant tables turn over, and another aircraft drops through the clouds toward the island. Tourism is not simply part of Madeira's modern economy. Regional policy describes it as one of its central economic engines, and official statistics show that visitor activity continued growing through 2025. But large numbers never show us who actually carries them. For that, we have to come back down to street level. Behind a hotel kitchen, someone is already washing the pans from breakfast while preparations for lunch begin. A delivery driver wrestles crates from the back of a van. A cleaner pushes a cart through a corridor whose guests may never know her name. At the Mercado dos Lavradores in Funchal, fruit glows beneath the lights, while conversations overlap between sellers and customers. The market remains a showcase for regional produce, but behind every colorful display is something less photogenic. Planting, carrying, sorting, driving, lifting, and selling. Farther from the center, the economy becomes smaller still. A farmer tends a narrow plot carved into a slope. A mechanic bends beneath the hood of a car. A fisherman repairs equipment near the harbor. A family-run cafe counts on enough tables being filled before the day is over. These are not romantic symbols of a simpler life. They are businesses. They have bills. Fuel costs money. Equipment breaks. Weather interrupts plans. A quiet week can be felt immediately when your livelihood is measured not in corporate reports, but in rooms occupied, meals served, fish landed, produce sold, or customers walking through the door. And that is the strange economic rhythm of an island admired for escape. Visitors come here to slow down. Many of the people serving them cannot. Their mornings begin before breakfast is placed on the buffet. Their afternoons continue while visitors swim, hike, photograph cliffs, or drink coffee facing the sea. Their work is what allows leisure to look effortless. Yet Madeira is not sustained by tourism alone. Agriculture still puts local produce into kitchens. Fishing still connects deep Atlantic water to the table. Small businesses continue to turn local knowledge into income. Modern Madeira is a web of old livelihoods and newer industries, each depending on the other more than the postcard suggests. And resourcefulness here should not be confused with ease. People adapt because adaptation is often required. They combine skills. They work seasons. They rely on family. They find ways to make small spaces, small businesses, and difficult terrain produce something valuable. From a distance, Madeira can look like paradise, operating smoothly on its own. Up close, you begin to see the hands keeping it moving. And once we notice those hands, a harder question becomes impossible to avoid. What happens when the island becomes so desirable to the outside world that ordinary life becomes harder for the people who call it home? But paradise becomes a dangerous word when it hides the cost of living inside it. As evening approaches, Madeira can still look almost unreal. Sunlight turns the cliffs gold. Hotel pools become quiet mirrors. The last hikers return from the mountains, carrying photographs of waterfalls, forests, and clouds drifting below their feet. For a visitor, this may be the perfect ending to the day. For the people who live here, another calculation is beginning. Rent, work, fuel, groceries. The distance between where you earn your living and where you can still afford to live. Madeira's growing popularity has brought opportunity, investment, businesses, and livelihoods. But the same desirability that fills aircraft and hotel rooms has also intensified debate over housing pressure and the ability of local residents to find homes at prices their wages can sustain. Housing concerns have become serious enough to reach the European Parliament through petitions and a fact-finding process focused on the island. And this creates one of Madeira's most uncomfortable paradoxes. A place can become more valuable to the world while becoming more difficult for some of the people already living there. There is no simple villain in this story. The hotel worker needs visitors. The restaurant owner needs full tables. The driver needs passengers. The farmer may depend on restaurants buying local produce. The family renting a room may depend on that additional income. Tourism brings money into communities that cannot simply replace it overnight. But dependence also creates vulnerability. When so much activity is connected to people arriving from somewhere else, changes beyond the island can quickly reach the kitchen table. Then there is the landscape itself. All day, we have admired Madeira's mountains. But steepness has another face. Heavy rain can turn slopes unstable. Narrow valleys can concentrate water. Rock can fall. Roads can close. The same dramatic terrain that makes a photograph unforgettable can make emergency access difficult when something goes wrong. And fire can transform green mountains with terrifying speed. In August 2024, a major wildfire around Ribeira Brava became serious enough for Portugal to activate the European Union Civil Protection Mechanism, bringing firefighting aircraft from Spain to support local efforts. Imagine the change. A mountain that yesterday smelled of eucalyptus, damp earth, and warm grass. Today smells of smoke. Wind pushes ash through the air. Sirens replace birdsong. Families look upward, not to admire the ridge, but to judge how close the flames have come. This is the Madeira that postcards cannot hold. An island is beautiful partly because its boundaries are so clear. Ocean, mountain, cliff, sky. But those same boundaries can also make life feel smaller when a young person begins asking, what comes next? Can I afford a home here? Is the work I want available here? Do I stay near my family? Or cross the same Atlantic that has always defined the edge of this island? There is no single answer. Some leave. Some return. Some build completely new lives without ever leaving the mountain where their grandparents lived. That tension matters because resilience should never be confused with happiness. People can be resourceful and still be tired. A community can be strong and still face problems it cannot solve around a family table. A beautiful island can still contain anxiety, inequality, uncertainty, and difficult choices. To love Madeira honestly is not to pretend those things do not exist. It is to see them and still understand why, tomorrow morning, lights will appear again on these slopes. Which leaves us with one final question. After the steep roads, the hard work, the fires, the uncertainty, and the pressures of a changing island, why do so many people still choose to call this place home? With all these challenges, why do they choose to stay? Why remain on an island where roads climb endlessly, where work can depend on seasons, where fire can turn a green mountain black, and where the ocean is both a beautiful horizon and a reminder of how far the rest of the world really is? Perhaps because home is rarely measured by convenience. It is measured by recognition. The sound of a neighbor calling your name from across the road. The smell of bread warming in a kitchen you have known since childhood. The curve of a mountain that tells you where you are before any sign ever could. The table where the same family stories return year after year. The cemetery where grandparents rest. The garden planted by someone whose hands you still remember. These things do not appear on travel brochures, but they are the invisible geography of belonging. For many people in Madeira, staying does not mean refusing change. The island has changed constantly. Roads became tunnels. Old livelihoods adapted to new economies. Villages connected more closely to the cities. Young people grew up looking beyond the Atlantic while still carrying pieces of the island with them. Some leave because they must. Some leave because they want to. Some return years later. And some never imagine another place could truly feel like theirs. There is no single Madeira experience. But beneath all those different lives is something worth noticing. For centuries, people here learned not to demand that the landscape become easier. They learned to work with what existed. If water fell in the wrong place, they guided it. If the mountain was too steep, they shaped terraces into it. If villages were separated by rock, they found ways through. If the sea provided food, they went out before dawn to meet it. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson Madeira offers a world obsessed with speed and convenience. A good life is not always the life with the fewest obstacles. Sometimes it is the life in which we know our place deeply enough to care for it, to know the people beside us, to understand where our food comes from, to notice the weather, to recognize when someone needs help, to sit at a table long enough for conversation to become memory. Tomorrow morning, the island will wake again. Lights will appear on the slopes. Coffee will be poured. Engines will start. Water will continue moving through narrow channels cut into the mountains. And the Atlantic will keep breathing against the black volcanic shore. Madeira will still be difficult. Madeira will still be beautiful. And somewhere between those two truths, people will continue doing what generations before them learned to do. They will make a life here, and perhaps, in the end, that is what home has always meant.